is that darn Cardi Jew? They're making us ravenous look horrible.
If you've enjoyed this program, please click like and subscribe.
Baruch Yah. Welcome to another exciting edition of Torah Watchman Show, LLC, 501c3 company formed in Maryland of the United States of America, registered to federal government, where your tax-exempt contributions will go back to you for credit, for tax credit, if you're an American citizen or dual American citizen, where taxation is still important to you. Like my beautiful brothers and sisters in Israel, you know, a lot of dual American Israeli citizens are there as well. I hope everyone's well. Yes, this video presentation is hosted by none other than Hakam Yaar ben-Emmett. Hope everyone's been well. I've missed you so much. I really have. God bless all of you. God bless B'nai Noah. God bless all my Cardi brothers and sisters around the world. I'm coming home to Ashdod in about 6 years. If anyone's listening from Israel, know this combat war veteran is coming to Israel so that my daughter can be married in Jerusalem, and I will be able to dance at her wedding. That's my promise to my daughter. Yes, I hope everyone's well. Okay, interesting. This Torah Parsha in non-leap years, okay, is conjoined with Bahar. Last Parsha, I did a video on Bahar. This one is Bechukotai, is the continuation and the ending of the book of Leviticus or Vayikra, okay? If you want to turn with me, the Sidra portion here is Leviticus chapter 26, verse 3, through chapter 27, verse 34. If you want to know what the name Bechukotai means, it simply means my statutes, okay? My statutes, my mitzvahs, my commandments, which are very important. When Jehovah and God speaks, we listen. Because you know why? Because our Father God wants to bless us in ways is unimaginable. Jews living in a diaspora today, Jews living in even Israel today, have no idea of how the ancient tribal Israel was blessed when they were keeping the commandments. Read about the story of King Hezekiah, how his life was extended, I believe, 10 extra years when he had a life-threatening illness. I don't know what it was, but because of his righteous sake, his life was extended. And God defeated the Assyrian military that had come over and tried to destroy Jerusalem in a miraculous way. Listen, it pays to command and pray, but pray before the Lord your God. It pays to pray before your Lord your God daily on your face. I cannot exhort you enough about this, because when you flip the coin, the heads and tails, and I hope you don't get tails, the converse is true also. Where there's blessing, there's an equal converse for curses. And unfortunately, you can read Jewish history and know about the Babylonian diaspora. Before that, the 10 tribes of Israel, northern Israel, were carried off by the Assyrian Empire. And it took us until 1948 to form a nation again. 2,000 years ago, we were under Roman occupation. Jerusalem was destroyed in 135 CE. Before that, 70 CE, King Herod's beautiful temple was destroyed as well. And we were dispersed throughout the 4 winds of the planet, like leaves, essentially. But we have come home on Israel high. Okay? So a general overview. We have a vivid description in this parsha about yin and yang, about opposites, blessing and curses. When you come to that crossroads, you have 1 or 2 directions you can go, right or left. I don't know if you're right-handed or left-handed, but you have 2 directions you could go. You cannot go both ways. And you know, when you raise your child in the way of the Lord, they said that they will not depart from it. They may depart from it, you know. But you know, despite all the hills and valleys and vales and everything else of a young person's life, they will remember that foundation and they will come back to it. This is God's promise. He will never ever forget his people. He will never forget the promises he made to Abraham, Isaac, and Yaakov. Okay? First Aliyah, as I said in the introduction here, we are promised incredible blessings if we diligently study Torah and observe the holy mitzvah. What is a mitzvah? Okay, it means a good deed. And there's thanks to Ramban, there are 613 mitzvahs, which have various blessings, positive and negative commandments. A lot of them are centered upon Levites, and a lot of them are centered upon Jews living in Israel. So some of them, it's not humanly possible to keep them unless you go to Israel. I mean, there's a number of pilgrim holidays, for instance, like Pesach, that are designed by intent to be accomplished and implemented living in Israel, in tribal Israel. So the blessings include plentiful food. We like lots of food, right? You like a lot of disease-free food as well, right? You don't like moldy tomatoes. If you don't have the right pH in the soil chemistry for tomatoes, they'll rot out. I had this problem growing tomatoes last year, and I took measures this year to help prevent that embarrassing thing when my wife expects me to have a green thumb, and I turn out it's not good produce. But something is remarkable. The soil chemistry changes in Israel instantly when a righteous Jew, or righteous family, or righteous tribe of Israel fall on their face, ask for forgiveness, and seek the kindness, the loving kindness, and love and ingratiating spirit of the Lord their God. And they keep the holy mitzvah. That soil becomes consecrated. When it becomes consecrated, you can grow anything there. You don't have to be in Indonesia. Indonesia was created by a volcanic chain, no telling how many millions of years ago. Yes, I will say that. And the soil chemistry, you can grow anything, whether you have any farming skills at all, because the soil is so rich and pure. There's a reason why it's very difficult to grow food and produce in Israel, because of its arid climate, for one thing. But something transformational happened when Joshua led the 12 tribes of Israel and conquered Canaan, leading up to the time of the judges, leading up to the time of King David, leading up to the time of King Solomon, and some of the righteous kings like King Hezekiah. They witnessed plentiful produce. The seasonal rains came when they were supposed to. You know, if Israel does not get adequate snow or rain or precipitation during the winter months, they will have famine, and animals will starve, and people will be short on money and revenue when they don't have much produce or low quality produce to go to market. Fortunately, I watch the weather. I love the weather. I watch it Israel, and I pray when I see there's only 2% chance of rain. I pray the Lord my God makes that 98%. I rejoice when I see rain clouds coming over Jerusalem. I really do. And the winter rains actually transitioned a little bit into the spring before it became hot again. But what I'm saying is, something supernatural happens to the soil chemistry when a righteous Jew obeys the 613 mitzvot as humanly possible, when they study Torah and implement it in their life. There's a difference between studying Torah and living and breathing Torah. There's a big difference for that. And the promises are there. If you do this, I will do this. I will bless you. It's a contractual agreement with God. If we break that contract, if we don't heed the warnings of the prophets, then bad things will happen. We'll be invaded, we'll be conquered, Wild animals will come into our field and won't be able to survive. We won't be able to raise our family. And God does not want that. So you have physical security, you have problems with the produce, even problems of women being fertile and having children without a high incident rate of fatalities of babies and things like this. You have those assurances that God will help you. God will be there with you if you keep his commandments, if you treat your fellow Jew with love and kindness, if you keep the sabbatical years leading up to the year of Jubilee. We read about that in Bahar, remember? Now the second aliyah, more blessings, okay? Shalom in the land, the elimination of wild animals from the land. Now, there are wild animals in Israel today, not as many as there were in biblical times per se, but during the very I'm trying to say disastrous times of Jewish history, whatever remnant Jews were still in Jerusalem in that area, the city was destroyed, the walls were torn down, the temple was burned to ashes. There were still some Jews scattered through Samaria and Judea in that area. Even when the Jews were carried off in Babylonia and Persia, there still were some Jews there hiding, not revealing their true identity. There were animals everywhere. There were venomous snakes and things of this nature. But things are returning to that Eden-like environment because God is blessing technology in the 21st century in Israel. Israel has developed some of the most advanced irrigation techniques, water salination plants, in other words, converting salt water to fresh water. Of course, all the green energy and everything else, they're using all of that technology. And they are teaching other countries like Saudi Arabia how to turn desert into an oasis. It is amazing when you consider it, okay? Just Google it and Bing it if you don't believe me. Just look up the agricultural miracles in Israel, the technology and techniques and methods and things that they have developed over a period of time. Many of these inventions were patented, okay? So I like this saying from the second aliyah, 5 of you will chase away 100. 5 soldiers chasing away 100. And 100 of you would chase away 10,000. How is that possible? Remember the story quickly about the judge Gideon, okay? He started out with a huge army of men that he was going to help to defend as a judge of Israel, defend the Jews there against the enemies of Israel. But he ended up with only 300 men. But these were high quality men. These are individuals that have faith and trust in God. This is where God does miracles. God will allow you to share in his glory, but not for your hubris and narcissistic, egotistical self of a man, where you can find a lot of that in men and not so much in women, taking pride for themselves like kings and things like this. Look what I did. Look what I did. God wants to share in that glory. He wants you to be happy. He wants you to have good self-esteem. He wants you to enjoy a good victory. But he wants you to learn that you can only be successful. You can only be victorious if you allow God to take the steering wheel of your life in that car and drive for you. Give God all the glory. Well, maybe say amen. Third aliyah, and even more blessings, okay? An overabundance of crops. Your grain silos will be overflowing. Remember the 7 years of plenty in the time of Joseph, in Egypt? Jehovah's presence revealed in our midst. You will know that God is there. You know that imminent encounter with his glory is there, that kabod. You will see that light of glory shining above the Mishkan or the temple. You will know that God is there. You'll see God's kabod, that cloud, swirling massive clouds come over the tent of meeting and speaking to Moshe, the prophet of God, face to face, you'll know that God is with you, okay? This section also describes the more severe, terrifying punishments, which will be the lot of Jews. And just look at the pages of Jewish history. Look at the writings of Josephus. Just read about all these things, and you will know the disastrous, nightmarish outcomes, the negative outcomes of the Jewish people when they turn their face away from the one true God of Israel and turn their faces to the pagan gods of their neighbors, or when they break their faith promises of sabbatical years, when they don't return land that their Jewish brothers and sisters had to sell because they became destitute, and then that release of them as indentured servants at 49 years, or at least their children would not be in that kind of indentured servitude indefinitely. During some times of Jewish history, the kings refused to enforce those laws and allow people to cheat their fellow Jews. The widows and orphans suffered the most. These punishments listed in the third aliyah section include disease, famine, enemy occupation of the land, exile, the diaspora, and desolation of the land. Again, it is not easy to plant produce in Israel and bring anything significant enough to make a profit, unless you have God's helping hand there. The non-observance of the sabbatical year was probably the worst of sins. It says that. You know, you had pagan adultery, worship, and things of that nature. You had murderous intent and slander and gossiping and talebearers and things like this. But breaking legal contracts to your fellow Jewish brethren is a horrible sin. And breaking the promises of the sabbatical year is just devastating, because, you know, God has so much grace and mercy for those people that are destitute. He is, you know, the atikva and promise and hope of the Jewish people that there are better days ahead. But when those evil kings take that promise away, God becomes so angry and so livid that he allows the adversary to come in like a wild lion and prosecute our virtue, and it lead to destruction and desolation of the Jewish people. Despite all the desolation and destruction and judgment of the Jewish people when they turn their backs on God, this aliyah also concludes the promise, the return of the Jewish people, like basic law in Israel, is a law for every Jew to return to Israel when they're ready to move there and live there as Israeli citizens. The promise is not to utterly forsake us, even though it seems like God is not there. I mean, we ask for miracles, but we don't really believe in them, right? We have a scientific explanation for everything. I mean, if a child is delivered at 5 months and statistically that child should never survive for a host of reasons, but that child does survive. Or if an IDF soldier is shot in the head and left comatose, but that soldier revives. There's so many examples of this. Do we give glory do we give God the glory and praise for these things that many witnesses see that cannot be explained logically? The fourth aliyah, this section discusses various endowments pledged to the temple coffers. What are we talking about? A person can pledge the worth of an individual, in which case the Torah prescribes how much the person must pay. What am I talking about? Well, it can be indentured servitude for one thing. If a destitute Jew asks for coverage, asks for room and board and food and everything for a family, and he'll work for that 49-year period, or his son or grandchildren would do that, that person is worth a certain amount of money. I mean, everyone is worth something. I mean, if you have, like me, 30 years in information technology, that has a dollar amount attached, okay? It does not sound as bad as what it says here, but everyone has a worth. God knows the intrinsic worth of every human being, even though we feel worthless inside. I'm not going to go there. But anyway, depending on the gender and age of the individual being assessed, A lot of times there were Canaanite slaves. A lot of times there were women. Were they fertile? Can they have children? A need for surrogate mothers. Sometimes your lovely wife just cannot produce children. Remember the story about Rachel? They only had 2 children naturally with Yaakov. And then Leah had plenty of children. But what do? Rachel had to offer some of her maidservants to act as surrogate mothers so she could have more sons and daughters. This is what I'm talking about. An animal has a certain value too, and it's a pledged worth. Hear about auctions and things of that nature, and it's pledged to the temple. So a high quality animal that is kosher root per se, is no blemishes, no diseases, is not blind in one eye, does not limp, this kind of thing, is worth much more than an animal that is spotted, has diseases, and has issues. Okay? It's all about redemption levels. So the higher the value of a person, the higher value of an animal, it reflects its total redemption value. And redemption, we're always talking about our relationship before the Lord our God. Okay? If the owner chooses to redeem it, he must add 1/5 of his value to the redemption price. If an owner of an animal does not have the right kind of animal ready for animal sacrifices, even for sacrifices for themselves, for sin, for incidental sin, he can buy an animal or find an animal from another herd, but needs to add 1/5 to that. Because why? Because it's an entitlement. Because maybe he did not take care of his herd of sheep or goats or cows as well as he should have, about abusing animals, not feeding them the proper food at the proper time, not getting enough water, whatever. Maybe another shepherder took better care of their flock. Okay? So some of these were issues of replacing an animal for another animal. But you have to add 1/5 of the value of that total redemption price. The Levitical priest would set that redemption price. The same rule applies to a house which is pledged to the temple. Okay, what are we talking about? Well, unfortunately, people die, and people don't have a living will, and you have estate property that can just be homeless. Ownerless, I should say. And then it goes before the temple priest, and then decide how that property should be managed. Is it given to someone, or does a Levitical priest have that property leased out? I don't know. But there's a rule for everything. The rule for human beings, animals, house, and property as well. As far as redemption, it's always before God and his temple. 5th aliyah, the section discusses the endowment of land to the temple. This is a segue explanation for the previous aliyah. If it is land that which part of the family lot given to his ancestors when Israel was divided among the tribes, you remember Moses actually told the 12 tribes of Israel before they crossed the river Jordan with Joshua. Moses was not allowed to go to Canaan. He told them exactly how the land would be subdivided among the 12 tribes based on population numbers, okay? And worth, redemption value as well, okay? So with these discussions were ongoing about redemption price, a fixed amount, depending on its harvest yield. If you can raise more herd of sheep, greater numbers, because the grass is more fertile, or you have access to more rivers and streams and irrigation and things like that, or the weather is better on the east side of the Jordan River, things of that nature, redemption value will be higher. So if the owner chooses not to redeem it or use that property before the temple, before God's glory, it may be redeemed by any other individual. It could be sold to them or given to them to be used for their redemption. Okay? So In this event, if the land remains unredeemed totally, the land becomes the property of the priest during the next Jubilee year. And then at the end of the Jubilee year, the Levitical priests that took temporary ownership of that land, they would find any kind of survivors of the original owner for that. Think about how wills in a state are from state to state in America. If you don't have a living will, a deed of property or money or whatever to your family members, it could possibly be ruled to go to the state coffers. This is where this comes from, okay? So a lot of a lot of our legal system in our states and federal government comes from these discussion points in this parsha. In the sixth aliyah, land, aretz, which was purchased and then consecrated by the buyer, can also be redeemed, but it reverts to the original owner when the Jubilee arrives. A lot of these laws here and rules applied only for tribal Israel when they were living in the land of Canaan under Joshua's management. So these were lessons and use case examples what will be done in the future. Please understand that. In this time, Moshe and Aaron were alive and Miriam were alive and they were in the desert. Okay? So all firstborn livestock are sacrificed in the temple, and their flesh is consumed by the priest. A person who has an option of dedicating and consecrating any of his belongings specifically for the use of the priest. Listen, Levites need to eat too. A lot of time that big ascension altar, brazen altar, the big square-like altar that was raised above the ground with the four horns on either side. It was about a third of the way, I guess, in the tabernacle facing the Mishkan. Well, that was used as a barbecue pit, literally. People would bring a goat or sheep for a Thanksgiving offering or something like that. And, the fatty parts, the liver, the kidneys, and things of this nature went up in smoke, but the thigh and other cuts of meat and things like that could be shared with the owner. Okay? And vice versa for the Levites as well. Okay? So we're at the seventh aliyah, about ready to wrap up this parsha. It's a short one. The thicket tithe, which must be consumed by its owners in Jerusalem. You have to be in Jerusalem to keep this mitzvah. As previously mentioned, as well as the rules for redeeming the tithe if it's too burdensome to transport to Jerusalem. This is a pilgrimage kind of thing, where all the 12 tribes return to Jerusalem to bring baskets and donkey cart loads of produce and things like that represents their wealth or a fraction of their wealth, a portion like the 10%. We give 10%. Christians give 10% to their churches. Observant Christians do. This comes from the Old Testament, right? And of course, Jews give 10% of their membership to their synagogues to support the priesthood, support the rabbi, support the rent and the property taxes and the light and energy consumption of the keeping the synagogue running. Some synagogues close their doors because they run out of people to give those tithe and offerings. Okay? Now we're at the end of this parsha. We're also at the end of the book of Vayakra, Leviticus. I like this saying, even though it's Ashkenazi, and I'll explain what it means. Hazak, hazak, vanet hazak. What does that mean? Be strong, we will be strong. I don't mention this all the time, but at the end of every book of the Torah, 5 books of Torah, when you get to the end, we say that. Even in conservative synagogues, we say this. It's a tradition. It's not halakha, but it's a good thing to say. We are strong and strengthened and courageous each time we read a book of the Torah. Essentially, that's what that means. If you want to read the Haftarah, this is the prophetic, contextual revelate content that is based on the various Torah parshas. So for this Torah parsha, You'll be reading in Jeremiah chapter 16, verse 19, through chapter 17, verse 14. I like these sidra, these verses. I'm going to read 3 verses to you in chapter 17. You can follow along if you want to, okay? As the throne of glory exalted from the beginning, so is the place of our sanctuary. Listen, it's the Lord's temple, but it's the people's sanctuary. Does that sound beautiful? It really is. God desires to show us his glory manifested in our sanctuary. You know, you talk about a minion of people or a congregation of people, you know, the strength of numbers of people praying simultaneously for the sick amounts much. It does. Verse 13, Jehovah, who is the source of the hope of Israel, all that forsake you shall be shamed. And we've been a lot of shaming going on leading up to 1948, right? However, they who turn away from me shall be marked out on the earth, and they have forsaken the source of living waters, the Lord. Literally, God will send the rains and seasonal times when it's convenient to harvest your crop. You don't like a lot of rain when you harvest your grain because it can mold, right? You like the balance between sunny weather and rainy weather, right? That's what we're talking about. Verse 14, after that admonishment, heal me, Jehovah, then shall I be healed. Help me, my Ezri, like in Psalm 121. Then I shall be helped. To you, for you are my perfect praise. Maybe say, oh man. Listen, how is this needful for you, this Parshah? It's just reminding you that God has certain statutes. God has certain core values. I was talking to a Noahide that aspires to be a Jew one day in our synagogue. I've been working with him quite some time. He started out to be an atheist or agnostic person, and he comes from a mixed Jewish heritage, not imported. But I was trying to use things contextually relevant for him. That, you know, God wants to show us his glory. He wants to enjoin us in the wonderful supper that we have on every Shabbat. He wants to be there with us. He wants to rejoice with us every time we have a new child, in addition to our family, a marriage, and that kind of thing. You know, God wants to be there. He wants to help us out of the pit that we have fallen in. You lose your job, you lose your marriage, you can get a divorce, you lost your parents, have passed away. Whatever ever ails the soul, God is there. God has not forsaken you. God is always calling you. But does he get a busy hook, busy tone when he tries to call you? But this is very important. We cannot humanly keep all the 613 mitzvot, but God gives us the ability, no matter if we're in the United States of America or Melbourne, Australia, wherever we may call it home as a Jew, or a ben-Emmett, okay? God expects you to work within your means. God knows your talents and skills. He knows what you're capable of. Some people are more capable than others. It's easier for some people to do certain things, to pass certain tests, get certain degrees programs and things like that nature, or get that 20-year job and retire. And you wonder, why does that person is so lucky and I'm broke. I put my hands in my pocket and I don't have any change I can believe in. I really don't. Where's God in this? Well, God is pretty much where you left him. That is true. God is where you left him in your life. It may be 20 years in the past. But remember, if you're a Jew, remember what your bubby warned you, or about your bubby told you. Remember, if you were fortunate enough to go to a Jewish school as a child, yeshiva, but it didn't really translate to anything. It really didn't mean anything to you when you went to secular school. You just forgot all about that. Then that downward slope occurred. But you should remember one thing. God is ready to forgive you for who and what you are today, and forget your past ever existed. I can say this over and over again. Ezekiel chapter 18, verses 20, 21, 22, and 23, is the redemption plan, not just for the Jews, for Yehudim, but for B'nai Noach as well, and anyone else wants to join in the process of redemption. Listen, there were a lot of sojourners in ancient Israel, a lot of strangers, a lot of proselytes to Judaism, a lot of converts. They were equally blessed in that moment in time as much as anyone that was born of a Jewish mother or a Jewish father. So, until we can meet again, remember my motto. Share the knowledge and wealth and love and truth if everyone's willing to hear it. If they don't want to hear it, then you be that truth. You live that truth. Sometimes it takes thousands of dollars of charitable contribution to someone to wake their soul up and say, yes, even manna can fall in famine, scorched lands of Uganda, because there's someone in America that cares about them. Someone in America is listening to their pain and feeling their pain. If you can empathize with the discomfort and pain and suffering of your fellow brother, you're there, friends. You're there, friends. And giving charity to other people is instant redemption. It is instant redemption having your sins washed away. It really is. You don't need John 3:16. You don't need the blood of a Mashiach. All you need is to return to God who breathed in your neshama, your soul, and say, Papa, Tati, Abba, King of the universe, Melech Ha'olam, forgive me, I have sinned. Please help me to be a better person. Show me your glory. Build a great and mighty tower within my life so I can give back to those people that I refuse to listen to or experience in my heart their pain and their suffering. God is all about redemption, and he's all about second chances. He really is. Well, this is your Halcom, your ben-Emmett, signing out until the next time. But take care and God bless you. Shalom Aleichem. Until next time. Yisai il harim meyayin yavo Azri meim Adonai Ose shamayim v'ha'aretz El yotem l'mot ragleach El yonum shomreach Hine alaknum v'lo yishan Shomer Yisrael